In the last two videos, we learned what Docker is, how to run containers, and how to build our own Docker images. But there's still one important question. What happens if you delete a container? If you've ever saved a file, changed a setting, or stored data inside a container, you might expect it to still be there the next time you start one. By default, it isn't. In this tutorial, we'll learn how Docker volumes solve that problem. This is Docker Volumes Explained, an autism-friendly coding tutorial designed to teach at a calm pace with no unnecessary jargon. This will be a four-part tutorial. First, we'll learn why containers lose data. Next, we'll create a Docker volume. Then we'll connect it to a container. Finally, we'll verify that the data survives. By the end of this video, you'll understand how Docker separates applications from the data they create, and why volumes are an essential part of real-world Docker projects. First, let's look at the finished result we'll be building today. By the end of this video, you'll be able to remove a Docker container without losing your data. We'll create a Docker volume, save a file inside it, delete the container that created the file, and then start a brand new container. Even though the original container is gone, the new container will still be able to read the same file. That's because the file isn't stored inside the container. It's stored in a Docker volume. This is one of the biggest differences between containers and traditional applications. Containers are designed to be temporary, but your data often isn't. Docker volumes let you separate your application's data from the container itself, making it easy to replace, update, or remove containers without losing important information. Now that you've seen the finished result, let's look at why containers lose data in the first place. Before we create a volume, let's understand the problem we're trying to solve. Containers are designed to be temporary. When a container is running, it can create files just like any computer. But those files belong to the container itself. If you remove the container, everything stored inside it is removed as well. That's usually fine for the application, because containers are meant to be easy to replace. The problem is that some data isn't temporary. Things like uploaded files, application settings, and database records often need to survive even after a container is replaced. That's where Docker volumes come in. A volume stores data outside the container, so you can remove the container without losing the information you've saved. Now that we understand the problem, let's create our first Docker volume. Open Command Prompt and run docker volume create my-data. This command creates a Docker volume named my-data. Unlike files stored inside a container, a volume exists independently of any container. At the moment, the volume is empty. Think of it as an empty storage location that's ready to hold data. Nothing is using it yet, but any container can be connected to it. That's what makes volumes so useful. You can remove one container and start another, and as long as both containers use the same volume, they'll have access to the same data. Now that we've created the volume, let's connect it to a container and save a file inside it. Now let's use the volume. Run the command shown on screen. This command creates a new container and connects it to the volume we just created. The -v option tells Docker to mount the my-data volume at the data folder inside the container. The rest of the command creates a simple text file named message.txt and writes the word hello into it. When the command finishes, the container stops automatically. Even though the container is no longer running, the file is still stored in the Docker volume. The important thing to remember is that we didn't save the file inside the container. We saved it inside the volume that the container was using. Now let's remove the container completely and see whether our file is still there. Now it's time to prove that the volume worked. First, remove the container. At this point, the container is completely gone. Next, create a brand new container and connect it to the same volume. This command starts a new container, mounts the my-data volume, displays the contents of our file, and then automatically removes the container when it's finished. You should see hello. Even though the original container was deleted, the file is still there. That's because the file wasn't stored inside the container. It was stored inside the Docker volume. This is one of the biggest advantages of Docker volumes. They let your data outlive the containers that use it. Now that you've seen it in action, let's review what we've learned. We started by learning why containers lose data when they're removed. Next, we created a Docker volume to store data outside of a container. We then connected that volume to a container and saved a file inside it. After removing the original container, we created a new one and verified that the file was still there. That's the key idea behind Docker volumes. Containers are temporary, but volumes are designed to persist. By separating your application's data from the container itself, Docker makes it easy to replace, update, or remove containers without losing important information. You now understand one of the most important concepts in Docker and a technique you'll use in many real-world projects. Congratulations, you've now completed our introduction to Docker. Over these 3 videos, you've learned how to run containers, build your own Docker images, and use volumes to preserve data. Those 3 concepts form the foundation of Docker and will help you understand many more advanced topics in the future. If you'd like to see more Docker tutorials, such as Docker Compose, networking, or deploying real applications, let me know in the comments. If there's enough interest, I'd be happy to continue the series. If this kind of direct autism-friendly tutorial is helpful, you should subscribe to my channel. It's a great way to find your way back here. You can also support the channel and find additional resources at patreon.com/autisticoder, where I offer additional products and resources to help you continue learning. Thank you for watching. Let's keep learning and growing together.